Welcome to HED Talks. What do you think of this series, The Plantagenets? It's a brutal family. It's an absolutely brutal family. So yeah, and it does not get any better. No, it doesn't get any better at all. So we're going to continue on with the kings and queens of England. So this person that we're going to focus on today is an exceptional king. Well, he's an exceptional royal of England, and we're going to find out why his life and death were so instrumental to the entire future of the Plantagenet dynasty. And he is the Black Prince. So we're going to be talking about the Black Prince today. But before we do that, we have to do what we always do, right? We have to go back in time. Yes, we have to go back in time to 1 week ago and get ourselves caught up. We need to catch up and know what we're talking about, what led to where we're going to go today. And last week, we were talking about Edward II. Do you remember him? Yeah. Yes, how could you forget him? Oh my goodness. So we're going to just take a quick drive through and remind ourselves of all the antics from Edward II. Okay, so you remember that all the kings had to know what? What was the most important educational instruction that they could possibly receive? How to fight. Warfare, how to fight. That's exactly correct. But Edward II, he wasn't of that ilk, was he? No, he didn't want to do things like this, remember? That wasn't his style. He was doing, he wanted to do, more sedate kind of things. And so his father was really concerned about that. And so he hired a champion in the games, in the jousting tournaments. The champion, do you remember the champion? Yes. Yeah, Piers Gaveston. Edward's father thought, all right, if I get this tough guy in here, he'll be a great, great, great influence on my son. Well, he was a great influence on his son. Remember? Yeah, yes, but not exactly the way that his father thought he would influence them. So they became really, really, really good friends. Read between the lines. And so his father, the king, thought, no, that's not at all what I had in mind. And so he exiled Piers. You remember that? Yes, they had to exile him. Yes, they did. They sent him to France. And then he had to do something else to correct this situation, and that was that he arranged a marriage, remember? You remember her, correct? Oh, yes, Isabella. And what has she come down through history as? The she-wolf. Yes, she's the she-wolf, and we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into what she actually did in her lifetime. But at this point in time, she's 12. She's 12 years old when she's married to Edward II. She's a 12-year-old girl. All right, so he's married, and Piers has been exiled. And then you remember who's his father, by the way? Longshanks, right? The great warrior, Longshanks, okay? So that's why it would be like really important to him that his son, live up to his reputation. So when Edward Longshanks dies, all right, a courier is sent immediately. You have to find the king instantly, don't you? The new king, you have to find him instantly so that he can go and claim his throne, because in the interim, is there danger? Yes. A lot of danger. And so you have to go find him immediately. And then normally the new king would do what? Rush to be crowned, exactly, to eliminate any usurpers. But the very first thing that Edward II did when he found out his father died and that he was the new king of England, what was the very, very first thing that he did? Yes, exactly. He sent word to get his friend, Pierce, back. He said, the coast is clear, you can come back. And so he does. He comes back. Now there's going to be a coronation for the new king and the new queen, young Isabella, 12 years old. 12 years old. All right, and so there's a coronation and there's a feast at the coronation. And you remember, how was Pierce treated at this great event? He was treated royally.
Wasn't he running it?
He was the star of the show, right? Remember, he was wearing the royal purple, right? And I don't even know, I didn't have a slide up for it. I don't think I might have said it, but he also was wearing the queen's jewelry. I know, I can't believe I forgot to tell you that. I didn't have a slide for it, and I was like, did I say that? I don't know if I said that. Yeah, he was wearing her jewelry, and the banners hung in the hall, his and Edward's, and Isabella's was not there. And then the whole time, during the whole feast, Edward was paying attention to who? Pierce. Yes, just to Pierce and not to his wife, the new queen, in any way at all. And how did the French nobles feel about that? They were enormously insulted, and the English nobles, what was their reaction? This is not good foreign policy, is it?
No.
Not at all. And then it gets worse. Remember, it got worse. Not only did he completely snub his nose to Isabella and the French nobility, but he starts to give Pierce some land. Remember that?
Yes.
It's supposed to go in the family. It was supposed to go to one of his cousins. And he gives this piece of land to Gaveston, who has no claim to it whatsoever. He's just handing off that land. Can you get through there okay?
Yep, thank you.
All right, so this is really upsetting everybody, and it just goes on because he's taking more and more, right? So this leads to what?
Well,
The Barons' War. Remember the Barons' War? Yes, the Barons' War. And Thomas of Lancaster is a relative, okay? We have to know that these are all royal, so it's all in the family. He is the wealthiest man in the land at this time, and so he has a lot of power and a lot of say, and he comes up with something that is going to restrict Edward's authority and ability to do what? To give land and titles and all that kind of thing, right? So they come up with these ordinances that we saw last week, and it very specifically in this document, which is stored in England to this day, it comes up, it says specifically in Article 20, who has to go? He has to go. Not only does he have to go, but if he returns, what's going to happen to him?
he's gonna lose his head.
He's going to die. He's going to die. He will be considered a traitor, and he will suffer the penalty for treason. And it couldn't be clearer, right? It could not be clearer. It's written, and it's signed. And there was no gray area here. He was going to die if he returns. And yet, despite that, Pierce and Edward have to kind of think about things, remember?
Yeah.
They have to think about how they're going to handle this, and they're a little bit indecisive about it. Pierce makes a kind of a gesture to go to Ireland is where he was going to go, but then guess what? He comes back. Remember, he comes back? And when he does, what does Thomas of Lancaster do?
He takes them.
He captures him, and he has a very, very hasty trial.
They cut his.
They're not really going to have a full-fledged trial, are they?
No.
No. They just have a kind of a, quickly put together trial, and Gaveston doesn't even have an opportunity to speak in his own defense. And so what ultimately happens, you're all saying it with a lot of pleasure, which worries me.
Hanging around Effie too long.
Yes. Off with his head, right, Effie?
Yeah.
Off with his head. So that's what happened. Now the
King doesn't know, does he?
the king does not know yet. He does not know yet. So the people, when this is discovered that this happened, and it happens on Lancastrian land, all right, so he's fully, totally responsible.
Yeah.
He headed the whole thing. So there is an acknowledgement that this wasn't done quite right. So the monument that you see here on this hill where the execution happened also has a plaque, and you can read the plaque. All right, and it's saying that
Pete Wallace himself.
nobody was really right here. All right, so it's acknowledged that this wasn't handled quite right. Now, in the meantime, we have Isabella, correct? And they have 4 children, and they have their eldest son, so they have an heir, so they're all set, right? But Edward feels like, with all of the scandal with Gaveston, he's got to do something to redeem himself in the eyes of the people. Now remember, his father was on campaign in Scotland, remember that? Yes. And so Edward feels like, all right, maybe I will gain some popularity. I have to do something here. So he decides he's going to go to Scotland, and he's going to deal with that situation, because he just dropped the whole thing after his father died. He didn't do anything about it. So he goes with a greater army than the Scots had, and what happened? Who was victorious? Yes, you remember Robert the Bruce. So he has this humiliating defeat. Okay, he's got this humiliating defeat. He just has the Gaveston scandal. This is a terrible thing for him. And then what happens immediately after this? Do you remember?
There was a famine.
Famine. So the only thing he's got, the only thing he's done well, is that he's provided an heir, correct?
That's it.
That's all that he's done. So he is really feeling pretty down, and he needs that relationship. Remember the relationship with Gaveston, where Gaveston was calling all the shots and telling him what to do? Mm-hmm. He needed that again, and he found another person like that. You remember Hugh Despenser and his father, also named Hugh Senior and Junior, but it was Hugh Junior that really had control of Edward. And once he had that control, they were taking over lands, remember? They were taking over lands, they were taking over titles. Edward was allowing this to happen. So then what do we have? Another what? Another revolt. There's another revolt, because that is not the way it goes. That's not the law. That's not what is supposed to be happening. So there's an uprising again, and this is again Thomas of Lancaster. All right, but because the Despensers had become so strong, they were able to put down this revolt. And do you remember they captured the barons? And they not only captured the barons, but what did they do with the family members? Which was despicable. That is not normal. But they captured and imprisoned the women and children, and then with the barons, they executed them, they killed them. Thomas Plantagenet was murdered at this time. There was one of the barons, you remember Roger Mortimer?
Yeah.
He escaped. He had been imprisoned, but he escaped, and then he fled to France. So he's in France, and he was the only one that escaped. Now, during this time also, Charles IV was going after Gascony. Remember, bad King John lost all that French land, but they had a little bit left. Charles wants that too. He wants to go after that. He doesn't want England anywhere in his territory. So he starts to go after that, and that's seen as a threat of war. Now the Despensers took this opportunity, as you recall, to get rid of the one last person that had any influence over the king, and that would be who? Isabella. She was considered an enemy of the state. They took her lands, they took her home, they took away her household staff, and most importantly, they took her children away from her. And they took her children in order to have control over her, right?
Yes.
So now what she's going to do, now she's not 12 anymore, is she? She's not a 12-year-old girl anymore. She's going to go to France because, and she's saying to them, I am the perfect person to go and work out some kind of a treaty. Why is she the perfect person to do that? Excellent. Yes, it's her brother. Charles IV of France is her brother. And she is the Queen of England. So if anybody can work out a treaty, it would be her. And so she does do that. Part of it is that Edward must come to France and pay homage to the King of France, to Charles, correct? Is he willing to do that?
No.
Nope. He was not willing to do that. So what he does instead, probably under the advisement of the Despensers, is he sends his son. He sends the heir to the throne. This is such a confusing move. Like, why would he do that? So now the Queen of England and the heir to the throne are in France with his enemy, who they're allying with. See, it just does not make any sense that they would have done that. And they probably very quickly realized their mistake. But it doesn't matter because it didn't turn out too well for Edward. What happened was Isabella, remember Mortimer? The one that escaped? What happened there? Yes. They had a scandalous affair. Actually, it really was very dangerous that she did that. Her sister, I think it was her sister, had just been imprisoned for having an affair. Men could do that all they wanted, but not the women. So she's really something. She's really tough. I mean, she put up, for many, many years, she put up with this husband and his favorites, and she was loyal to him, and she bailed him out on several occasions. And then when they took her children, that was it. She was done. All right. So now she's fallen in love with Roger Mortimer, and she's got the backing of her allies, and she's also arranged, while she's there, she's arranged a marriage for her son, the heir to the throne of England. And so through that, she's got even more backing, so she's got quite an army going into England, doesn't she? And when they march back into England, what happens? Yep, she leads them to victory. They capture the Despensers, and what happens to them?
They die.
Yes, they die. and then they are able to capture Edward, and they imprison him, and he's forced to abdicate the throne, and he abdicates to who? His son, exactly, yes. And so for this incredible, for a woman to do this, it's just really astounding. So she has come down to us as the she-wolf of France, meaning that she's a fierce woman, a fierce woman. All right, so now they've got Edward imprisoned. Remember this piece?
Yeah.
And he dies of dysentery. I think he wishes that he died of dysentery. No, there's a few rumors. Nobody really knows exactly how he died, but one of the most obscene, I guess, is that he died from having a hot poker.
Oh.
Remember that?
Yes.
Yes. How could you forget that?
Yeah, how did you forget that?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Where do you think he's-
But then there's another suggestion that he died of natural causes, but he was so badly neglected that the natural causes were actually induced by severe neglect. And then there is a third suggestion that he actually escaped, that people came and saved him. But that is the least likely. That's the least likely of all of them. But we do know that he died. Now, when he died, we have Isabella and we have Roger, and then we have our young Edward, right?
Yeah. Hello, Ed.
Our very young Edward, and he's just a kid. He's just like 10 years old, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so what does his mother have to do? He can't be king. He has to reach his majority before he's able to be king and acting as king. Until then, you have a what? A regent, exactly. So his mother is named the regent. She's controlling England. All right, and there's really nothing that the young king can do, can he? No, there's nothing. There's nothing, but, well, yeah, he studies warfare because what is his job?
That's his job.
That's his job. Yes, that's exactly right. That is his job. All right, so Edward III is waiting patiently until he's got some kind of authority. And in the meantime, his mother and her consort are running things, but guess who's really running things?
She is.
He is.
Oh, he is?
She's allowing it. So here's this great, strong woman that does this incredibly brave thing. Yes, and then once it's all said and done, she kind of sits back and she allows Mortimer to do all of these things that they were opposed to from her husband. They're kind of doing exactly the same thing that Edward II was doing. All right? He's taking lands. He's taking titles for himself. He's rewarding, his people. Right? Isn't that exactly what Edward II was doing? So it's just, it's just amazing. It's just amazing to me. But young Edward is studying. He's waiting. He's biding his time because he knows that he is eventually going to be able to take over. And as a matter of fact, just a couple of days before his 18th birthday, when he reaches his majority, he tracks down Mortimer, and guess what he does? Yes, he arrests him, he puts him on trial, and then his mother pleaded that he not execute him, but he did not listen to her, and so Roger was hanged for treason. His mother was she was treated very well, but she was in like a house arrest, for the rest of her life. Now, because this young man at 18 years old, this young man acted so decisively and followed through with it despite whatever, I mean, imagine the power these two people had over him growing up, and he did not allow that to cloud his judgment. He knew what he had to do, and he followed through, and he was able to do it. And so how do the barons, how do the nobilities feel about him?
They respect him.
There was great respect for him. So this is going to take a complete turn now. They have a lot of respect for him, and so they're going to follow him and give him the support. Now remember, there was an arranged marriage. So Isabella had arranged for her son to marry Philippa. It was a successful marriage. She was a very much loved queen in England. And look at the kids.
Oh my God.
Yes, they had 13 kids. They had 13 kids, so everything seems to be going well. We're having a really kind of a good, peaceful time in England right now. That doesn't happen very often, does it?
No.
But for the moment, everything's okay. For the moment until this happened. Charles died, and he dies without an heir. Is that dangerous?
Yeah.
That's really, really dangerous. And so he died unexpectedly. He was kind of young. So there's nobody that's been named. There's two people that are in line for this, okay? So one of them is Philip, okay? One of them is Philip, and he's a cousin. It has to go through the male line.
Oh.
It can't go through the women. Can't. All right, that changes eventually, but right now it can't go through the female line. All right, so he's a cousin. And then there is a second, more closer relative who is in line for the throne of France. Are you ready?
I know.
The closer male relative in line for the throne of France
Yeah, see?
is Edward III, because remember, Charles was his uncle, right? So he is a closer male relative than Philip, who is a cousin. But of course, the people in France don't want the King of England. French do not want that. And so they go with Philip, and Edward doesn't say anything. He's not making any noise right now.
No.
He's not the closest relative, but nobody's kicking up any dust about that. So what does he decide to do rather than leave that alone and be satisfied? Oh, he's got to go over after the little piece that England still has. He's going to go after Gascony. Okay? So now what does Edward have to do?
They're gonna go to war.
They have to. He has to. How can he just let the throne go by, not say anything, and then allow him to go in here and not? He's backed into a corner. And so because Philip has done this, Edward's going to do what?
Claims the throne.
He's going to make a claim for the throne. And this very thing, this exact thing, is what kicks off, what starts what we know of as the 100 Years' War. All right, so now Edward is saying, I am the King of England, I am also the rightful King of France, and so he's going to go after that. Do you know that there were flags made up? What do you see there? Yes, yeah, the fleur-de-lis and the English flag with the lions. And so they carried those banners, they used this in battle. Now, the first thing you have to do, if you're in England and you're going to France, you're probably going to have your first battles at, right? That makes sense. All right, so now we know, it's very well recorded, that the French used these galley ships. They used these galley ships. They were very large, all right? They were very fast, but they were kind of tough to maneuver. You can see that, right? And no sails, yeah, just oars. And then the English used these cogs ships. They're smaller, they use sails, they're easy to manipulate. And so what do you think happens?
The English won.
The English won. Yes, the English, they won. So they were down by like over 100 ships. The French had a much bigger fleet than the English did, but because they had this greater ability to maneuver, they actually won. The first battle is Edward III, who is building ships, and he is building the foundation of what? Yes, didn't exist before. Didn't exist before. It's Edward III who builds the foundation of the Royal Navy. All right, so we win at sea and we have to go to land. And where are you going to go?
Normandy.
You have to go to Normandy. Who was William the Conqueror? Norman. All right, and they lost that. John lost that. And so now that's what you want. You want to get that back, right?
Yeah.
And the English, have a weapon, and this is, for the time, a very high-tech weapon. And
Longbows.
yes, what did you say?
Longbows.
Longbows, excellent, yes. They're outnumbered, they're really outnumbered. And yet, because of their training, because of the strategies that they use, the equipment that they do have, they're successful. They're very successful. So now we know, we have Edward. He is very preoccupied in France, isn't he?
Yeah.
Well, what do you think Scotland's going to do?
Who's gonna come down and take care?
Oh my gosh, what a golden opportunity. What a great opportunity. So they're going to come down. Now, you know, they've been like attacking northern England. They just keep attacking, and England has to keep going up and, setting them straight, stay on your side of the line there. But Robert the Bruce thinks this is a beautiful, beautiful opportunity, except guess what? Edward had the foresight to predict that that's exactly what would happen. And so guess where some of his troops were? They were not in France.
They were on the
Yes, they were waiting. They were waiting for the Scots to come down and take advantage of the opportunity. He had prepared for that, and because he had prepared for that, he was able to capture Robert the Bruce, and he installed his own guy. Problem solved. Right?
Yeah.
For the time.
Yeah.
Yes, for the time being. For the time being. Okay. So we've got that problem. We've got that problem solved. We've got things going really, really well in France, and in order to take advantage of the momentum that they've got, Edward institutes something called the Order of the Garter. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
Because it still exists to this day. This originates in the 1300s, and it still exists to this very day. The Order of the Garter. And what it is an elite group, a special group of men, and they have to be chivalrous, and they have to be great warriors, and they have to be loyal, and there's only 26 that can be allowed into the order, and it is framed after, what do you think? Yes, Knights of the Round Table, and that's exactly what it's supposed to emote, this this glorious time of chivalry under King Arthur. And so it still exists to this day. Here's the robe of the Order of the Garter, and these are all,
Ornaments.
yes, the ornaments that, thank you, Effie, thank you, ornaments for the order to this day. It still exists to this day, and it comes from Edward III in the time of the 100 Years' War. Now, guess who happens to be among the 26 honored warriors in the Order of the Garter?
His son.
His son?
Edward of Woodstock is what he's named, but he's also known as what?
The Black Prince.
The Black Prince. So now we're meeting the Black Prince. And it's his story, it's his life and his death that changes everything. Everything. Changes the future. Changes the future. So Edward, the Black Prince, is trained by his father. Remember, he's very interested in warfare and the study of warfare. He's going to take his heir and he's going to make sure that he understands warfare too. In fact, he starts him out really, really, really young. The Black Prince, the young Black Prince, is trained as a toddler. When he's 7 years old, he gets his first suit of armor. And when he is 13, he enters the jousting tournaments
Oh, Lord.
with grown men, with seasoned warriors. He's 13 years old. His father puts him in the tournaments, and he does okay. He does all right. Well, he lives. At least he lives through this, right? All right. So he's raising him up very, very early. All right. And then you think that's bad. Remember how they go into Normandy, the battle
Yeah.
in Normandy? Well, his son, the Black Prince, is there too. In fact, he's leading it. He's leading it.
16 years old.
And he's 16. He's leading this victorious battle at the age of 16, despite the fact that he lost his banner, he fell off his horse, his life was in danger. And his father, who was there, said, he's got to prove himself. Don't go rescue him. He's got to prove himself. So he gets up, he fights valiantly. He gets up and he continues fighting. And we know what happens, correct? He wins, and he is given credit for this victory. And then something else happens during this battle. When it's all over, the Black Prince is walking through the field, and he comes across the body of a knight, and the knight is John of Bohemia. And John of Bohemia is a legend in his own time because he lost his eyesight during the Crusades. He was on Crusades and he was blinded. And he had been blinded for 10 years. But when this war came up between Philip and Edward, John of Bohemia sided with France, and he wanted to fight, and he said to his men, tie a lance around my arm, put me on a horse, and this blind old warrior, old soldier, rode into battle without being able to see, with a lance tied to his arm, and rode into battle. And that's how he chose to end his days. And when the Black Prince, the 16-year-old prince, came upon the body of this heroic person, he was so impressed that what he decided that he wanted to do to honor that bravery was to take the symbol. You see the symbol?
Yeah.
They're ostrich feathers. Is this starting to sound familiar? Ostrich feathers that John of Bohemia wore in his crown and part of his crest. And the Black Prince, who is also the Prince of Wales, right?
Yeah.
Yes, also the Prince of Wales, he decided that that was going to be a part of his.
So there it is right there.
What?
There it is.
Yes, that's going to be a part of his dress as the Prince of Wales, the ostrich feathers, and that still exists to this day.
Is that where it comes from?
That's where it comes from. The Black Prince during the battle at the onset of the 100 Years' War. He came across this man who rode into battle blind and was so impressed with him that that's why we have the ostrich feathers on the hat of the Prince of Wales to this day.
Oh my goodness.
All right, so these two are very impressive, don't you think?
Yeah.
You've got Edward III, you've got the Black Prince, they're winning everywhere, they're able to predict problems and take care of them. I mean, right now, England is just idyllic, right? It's absolutely idyllic. Nothing can go wrong with these two. They're amazing, except it can never be that way, right?
No.
It can never happen that way. So right as they're having their zenith of success, guess what sneaks in there? Yes,
Oh my God.
the bubonic plague, the Black Death. The Black Death comes to Europe. And so now all the fighting stops, right?
Kills
The-
everybody.
Yes, all the fighting comes to a stop. They have to do this. Now, in times, you've got waves of plague in Europe, and mostly what happens? What does the nobility do?
It goes high.
They get out of there because they can afford to. But Edward III and the Black Prince did not do that. What they decided to do was to stay and to do some crisis management in the best way they could with what they knew at that time. They tried to mitigate the infections. They did everything that they could to try to isolate and mitigate infection. It's pretty impressive for the 1300s. All right. The other thing that he had to deal with, remember, these are a very superstitious people, correct? If there's something like a plague, that probably means what? God's mad at them. It's the end of days. That's what the people were feeling. There was panic and terrible fear. Can you even imagine? Right? And so he did his best. They did their best to help people alleviate the fear that they were experiencing. And they were doing this even though Edward had lost his own daughter to the plague on her way to her wedding. She's on her way to her wedding. Now, all of the precautions that they took in as much as they were able to with what they understood, plus they had a very, very cold winter that followed, and so that kind of caused the plague to subside. So it slowed down a little bit. It slowed down. They had a breather from it, but even though they did all of that, they still, in England, lost estimates are 40 to 60% of the population. Amazing, right? So the Black Death was so fast that in one day you could wake up in the morning without any ailment and you could be gone by the evening. It was that fast. It was that fast. But Edward, yes?
Yeah, the question is, what did did they say it was?
What is the
was the
Black
Black Plague?
The Black Plague was brought in by fleas on rats. Yeah, it was brought in by fleas on rats.
On ships.
On ships, exactly, yes. Yep. So with everything finally settling down, somewhat under control, well then we can go right back to what? What's the favorite thing? The favorite thing to be doing? War, exactly, yes. So now we can go to war. And now we've got this battle, okay, in 1356, and it's going to be led by the Black Prince. He's just unstoppable. And so they have this battle. He is successful. In fact, he's so successful that guess what he's able to do? He captures the French king. Now the French king is their prisoner, and if you have the king as your prisoner, can you then pretty easily negotiate a deal? Yeah, you really can, can't you? Yes. All right, so Edward, he's going to negotiate a deal with the King of France, and so he's looking for some money, right? He wants some money. So for his release, he must pay 4 million French crowns.
Oh my.
4 million French crowns. They whittled that down over time, but that was the asking price for his release. But the big prize, and this is what they got. In order to release him, they also would get back.
Oh,
Right? Wasn't that what it's always been about?
the land.
Always been about Aquitaine, right? They're going to get that back. What does Edward have to do in return?
Now renounce his crown.
All right? And isn't that really what the King of France wants? Yes. So Edward's going to step back. He's got what he wants. He's got some money, and he's got that land. The land is everything. The land is what it's all about. Always has been. All right? And always will be as we go forward. All right. So now, for the moment anyways, we've got what? We've got peace, yes. So it's called the 100 Years' War. So we know some more is on the horizon here, right?
Right.
But for the moment, in fact, Aquitaine doesn't stay there with them for long, but they've got it for right now. So things are kind of nice and easy and peaceful. And so the Black Prince falls in love. All right, he marries Joan of Kent. She's like not a political alliance. He marries her for love. He's in love with her. He's in love with her. And so they get married, and they have 2 sons. They have Edward and Richard. So that's good, right? An heir and a spare, correct? Yes, an heir and a spare, except what happens is Edward the older, he falls. Yeah, dysentery is here. It never goes away. It's always here. Yes, so we've got both. We've got the Black Death. So the young heir, Edward, dies of the Black Death. And the Black Prince dies of dysentery. He's about 45 years old. He dies while he contracts dysentery while he's in battle. This is another separate battle. And he's not getting better, and he has to leave that and go home, and he dies of dysentery. And because he dies unexpectedly, I don't know how they can say unexpectedly. The man went into battle his whole life. I mean, wasn't it a possibility all along? But at any rate, So this is not the thinking, apparently, of the time. When he dies, his father is still alive. Okay? We have Edward III. He's still alive. He's still king. He's still king. Now, what he does right here, because of his son's death, because of the death of the Black Prince, changes the whole course of history. Changes everything. Changes everything. And nobody understands why he did what he did. Let's take a look at this. All right, so you've got Edward III. He has these 5 sons, correct?
Yeah.
Lionel died. He had died before the Black Prince. We have the Black Prince right here, and we know that he has died. His first son has died, but he's got Richard here. But the way it was in this time was, if the king is still alive, upon his death, it has to go to the oldest son. Who is the oldest son? John of Gaunt. We're going to hear more about him next week. So John of Gaunt is next in line, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what happened.
No.
That's not what happened. And no one can figure out why Edward would have made this unusual jump. So I took this from the Encyclopedia Britannica. Just so you know where I got this from, because I don't think I didn't cite it here. It's from the Encyclopedia Britannica. After the death of the Black Prince, King Edward wrote his will and Act of Entail, in which he named his heir, rather than naming his eldest living son, who was John, to be the next king. He did something quite unusual. It's unusual. That's not the way it's supposed to go. He named his grandson Richard, who's little.
Oh.
Just a little kid. All right, named his grandson Richard, okay, the eldest living son of the Black Prince. All right, and then he cites something called the right of substitution, and so that people would accept this. Okay, yes, all right, and then here, okay, after Richard, he named the next in line for succession. Talk about stirring the pot. Look how he's stirring the pot. All right, so in case this, in case that, in case, okay? So next, after Richard, then is the eldest son, the full-grown man, who also went into battle with his brother, the Black Prince. In fact, he lived in the household of his brother, the Black Prince. That was his strongest influence. So they were very alike, and I'll tell you more about him next week. And then it goes on to the other sons. Okay, so let's take a look. So we've got, so it should go John, Edmund, and Thomas, right?
Yeah.
That's how it should go. But for some reason, it goes over here to a child, a little person. Haven't they had enough of that? Not yet, apparently. And so, because of this, all right, we've got John of Gaunt, who is the Duke of, we have Edmund, who is the Duke of, and we see their descendants. Do you see this? Here, these are the two brothers left and their descendants. And because of this decision, it directly leads us to, yes, because now they're going to battle back and forth, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that next week. But before we get to the War of the Roses, we have Richard II to deal with, don't we? Oh, I have to tell you about him, all right, because he is known as the tyrannical. And I am going to tell you the tyranny of Richard II. not next week, actually. I'm off next Wednesday.
Oh,
So in 2 weeks, when we come back in 2 weeks, I'm just off for the Wednesday, so I'll be here for everything else during the week next week. But when we come back in 2 weeks, I will tell you the evil doings of Richard II that might explain why he doesn't have any heirs. Okay? The Black Prince.
He is.
He's the son of the Black Prince.
Okay.
All right? Yes. I went for a more sinister looking person, but this was the best I could do. Okay? All right, so next time, in 2 weeks, when we come back together, I will tell you about the tyrannical reign of Richard II. Thank you all for coming, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.